welcome to this edition of Dustin's Kaleidoscope. I am Dustin, and I have the pleasure of being here today with Brianna LoSardo, who is the Special Collections Assistant at Seton Hall Archives.
Yes.
Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
First of all, for those of us who are not familiar with what an archive is, can you give us just a little basic definition of an archive?
Sure. So basically, the archives exist to sort of preserve and make available historical materials. Specifically for Seton Hall, we have materials related to the university, and we're also the repository for materials from the Archdiocese of Newark, as well as we have manuscript collections relating to prominent individuals in the Newark area usually, and rare books collections also. So we kind of have a little bit of everything.
Okay, so it's not just specific to Seton Hall, but just the surrounding area as well.
Yeah, so we have a lot of Seton Hall collections, but there's also the Archdiocese and other politicians' papers and things like that.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So how far back does it go? Like including everything, meaning both the Seton Hall specific documents as well as the documents that you have outside of Seton Hall. How far back does it go?
So for Seton Hall, the university was founded in 1856, so nothing really before then for Seton Hall. The Archdiocese was founded in 1853, so again, that's pretty much the earliest from the Archdiocese. Before that, our oldest rare book is from 1473.
Wow.
So, and we have a manuscript collection, the Craft Collection, that has pages from some older volumes as well, and those go back to about 700 or so.
So how did your archive receive this? Like, why were you selected to receive this? The non-Seton Hall.
It really depends. Often they come from either ex-professors, retired professors from Seton Hall or alumni, or, various other people who had some kind of connection with the university will decide to donate their papers to us or their collection that they've been collecting for their entire life. And that's it's sort of hodgepodge how things come to us.
Okay.
Yeah.
And is it basically, so I can understand the professors because they've been at Seton Hall, like maybe during, some part of their career. But how about people who donate who are not particularly, affiliated with Seton Hall? How would they go about contacting you and saying, hey, I have this information? And how do you, as the university, decide whether or not it's worthy enough to be in the archives?
We just sort of decide on donations on a case-by-case basis. So the best thing to do if you had something that you wanted to donate was to just contact us and let us know what you have, and then we can see if it fits in with our collecting policy and if it sort of is best served by being in our archives,
So if I'm interested in finding out, like if I would want to actually go to the archives, how would I do that? Is it open to the public?
Yes, we're open to the public Monday through Friday, 9 to 5. You can call our office. It's 973-761-9476. Or you can send an email either to me at brianna.losardo@shu.edu or to our general email archives@shu.edu.
Okay.
And we can make an appointment for you to come in.
And so if people are looking for, I know we spoke briefly before the show started about people who may have been in different parishes in this area, where they can possibly find genealogy information on their families. Is that also there as well, or are you a resource to just help them in other ways?
Well, we have a collection of parish records from the Archdiocese of Newark. What we have is just parishes that are currently in the Archdiocese of Newark, which is Bergen, Essex, Hudson, and Union counties. And these are mostly before 1930 or so, these records. So if you're looking for sacramental records like baptisms, marriages, confirmations, we have many of those records on microfilm, and we also have cemetery records on microfilm as well. So those things you could get directly from us. You would contact us to set up an appointment, and then people can come in and search through the records themselves. Or we also offer a service where we do searches for $25 per hour.
So if someone comes and during the hours and they're not quite sure, they want to actually do the research, at least initially do the research themselves, are there librarians or archivists there available to help them at a very basic level?
Yes, so the archive staff is available to help you. The important thing to know about Catholic records is that everything is kept at the parish level.
Okay.
So you have to kind of know which parish. You don't need to know exactly which one. If you can give us an address, we can help you find out which parishes are near that address. But, sometimes we get people who come in or who call and they say, well, I think they were somewhere in northern New Jersey, and that's really not specific enough, So sometimes it helps to start with civil records. We don't have any civil records at the university, but sometimes we refer people to go to Trenton and search the state archives for civil records to find out where the family was, and then you can get into the Catholic records through the parishes.
Okay. And once they've done that, then they can obviously come to Seton Hall.
Yeah.
So for the records that are not specific to parishes, so for someone who's not looking for their family records, if they are looking for specific writings from professors who have taught at Seton Hall, how would they go about finding that? Like, how do they even know it exists, for example? Like, there's some special subject.
So on our website, we have a list of finding aids for the manuscript collections and for some of our Seton Hall and Archdiocesan collections. And those will often tell you the contents of a collection and, what sort of subjects the collection covers. So you can find that information through the finding aids. We also have a lot of collections that still don't have finding aids available yet. So sometimes if someone has a question about something, say, in the history of the Archdiocese, they want to know something about the history of a particular parish. If they call up and ask, we might be able to find something that's not publicly available yet, because we're still working on making everything available to the public that can be seen online. So there are some things that you can find online, but also if you have a question, it can't hurt to call and see if we might have something.
So at this point, what percentage of the collection is available online, approximately?
Yeah, I couldn't really give a percentage. I mean, we're working on getting more of our collections visible that way.
Okay.
But yeah, and of the things that are not, that we don't have finding aids up for, that aren't visible online, some of them we also wouldn't be able to show to researchers because they're not processed yet. They're not in a state where they're stable enough to be brought out and looked at by people as well. So it really depends, but
you can always call if you...
But yeah, if you have a question, it's best to call, and I mean, the worst we could tell you is no.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And you mentioned that there are some documents that have not been processed yet or are not available due to their... I don't know, did you mean that they're like too fragile? Did you mean that they just haven't been processed, or is it a combination?
Yeah, I mean, if things are improperly housed, they're not, they're not in folders in boxes that you could take one out and look through and keep things in order.
I see.
Sometimes things are, it depends really how we get documents in. So sometimes you get nice files all neatly put in boxes, and sometimes you get just a box full of paper that's, not in any kind of order. So certain things can be made available more quickly than others.
So what do you? So let's say someone has something that Seton Hall thinks should be in their collection, and they do drop off a box that hasn't been categorized in any way. One, how do you determine whether or not, since it's not categorized, how do you determine whether or not it's something you want? And after you have it, can you explain the process of what you have to do in order to get it in the state so that the general public, or at the very least Seton Hall, university students can access it?
I mean, I'm not personally that involved with the processing aspect, so I don't know if I could really speak to how a collection is processed with the kind of expertise that you're looking for.
Okay.
But as far as how would we determine if we want something that comes in that state, usually we wouldn't accept something until we determined that it would work within our collections. So we would at least know sort of the contents of the collection, whose papers they are or what subject it addresses, and then we can sort of address the processing from there, mostly trying to get things stabilized. We want everything to be in a state where it's, it comes to us at a certain state of preservation, and then we want to at least maintain that,
Okay.
so that things don't deteriorate, have things housed correctly. And
So we've spoken a bit about university professors in the different parishes. What if there's someone who is just in this vicinity who has something that maybe their family has that they think should be archived somewhere? Is there a different process for someone who is, basically not affiliated with the university or with a parish than there would? Is there a different process for those people?
Like I said, it's kind of on a case-by-case basis. I mean, we have some other areas. We have rare books collections on Irish history, so we're often interested in things that relate to Irish history or Civil War. We have a large Civil War collection.
Oh, okay.
So there's other areas that we look for as well. It just depends, we would basically, if someone had something to donate, we would sort of look at it on a case-by-case basis and determine if it works within our collections.
Is there anything you're missing from your collection that you want to tell people that you would like people to?
Any requests?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm really not sure. It's just, as things come in. So.
Okay. And you mentioned the Civil War, so I'm interested in this. Is it Civil War, the Civil War collection that you have, is it specific to New Jersey? Is it specific to this area, or would you have information for anyone?
It's mostly a rare books collection.
Oh, okay.
So we have some that are specific from New Jersey and some that are general. It's rare books.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So.
And the rare books, those, I'm assuming that these are older books, so they're housed in a different way, probably in, like where you have to wear the gloves,
Yeah.
and they're probably in a area like that. Can the general public actually access those books? Have they been transferred to microfiche, or?
The public can access them. They're not housed they're not shelved in a publicly accessible area.
Okay.
So if somebody would like to see one of those books, they're all in the main catalog for the Seton Hall University libraries.
Mm-hmm.
So you would find them in the catalog and then request it, and we would make an appointment for them to come in. We'll bring the books out to the reading room, and they can use them there. But
Okay.
people don't get to go back and browse through the shelves, but they can find things in the catalog.
And that's probably because you probably want to keep
Yeah.
the books and the collection in a
Some,
certain state. Okay. Well, we have about a minute left. We're going to come back on the other side, and I want to ask you specifically, like, what you do at the archives. I know that you've been there for a couple of years now, but we'll be back. This is Dustin's Kaleidoscope, and we'll be back in a few moments.
Local government, local educational institutions, and local community members all use cable access TV to communicate their message. They depend upon it as an affordable means of outreach. Public educational and government access television empowers local government agencies, individuals, and groups to use the media to speak directly to their constituents in a more direct and cost-effective way. Make sure everyone has a voice. Support your local PEG channels.
Welcome back to Dustin's Kaleidoscope. I am Dustin, and I am here with Brianna L LoSardo. And thank you again for being here. And that was great information about just about Seton Hall, the archive, and the types of things you have in the collection. One thing that we were talking a little bit about off camera about was the paper. So you mentioned a little bit about how the paper could possibly disintegrate. Could you explain? Like, does that include like certain collections, or is it like a certain period of time, or could it be any paper?
Well, yeah, I mean, any paper is susceptible, especially if it's been through, moisture, or if it's been exposed to a lot of light. So any kind of paper can be damaged. Usually we just try to keep things flat, and we try to keep them protected again from light and from moisture. We were talking about the rare books.
Yes.
And I was saying that it seems that the pages aren't often the biggest problem. It's mostly covers and bindings, things like that get a lot of wear and start to come apart. leather-bound books often get red rot, where the covers turn sort of powdery and there's this reddish dust that comes off of them.
Oh, okay.
So those we in theory we could send them to a bindery. We don't always have the resources to do that, to get them rebound or recovered. So we often will wrap them in acid-free paper to keep the pages together and protect them again from light. If they have red rot, keep it sort of contained. Or we'll put them in boxes to keep everything together and sort of stable.
So
Yeah.
now that you've mentioned this, I'm sure there are people who have documents or books or something that maybe in 20 or 30 or even 50 years, like maybe their ancestors will want to donate, whether it's to Seton Hall or somewhere else. What would you suggest that people do today to help preserve any documents, books, or anything else that may be history worthy, later?
I think the biggest thing is where you store them. A lot of these things sort of get shoved into attics or basements, and those are actually the worst places.
Oh, really?
Because, your basement might be kind of cool and damp, and
But the attic too?
moisture can get in. The attic, it gets very hot, and sometimes there's depending on if you have windows up there can be a lot of light.
Okay.
So I guess just sort of keeping them sort of in a more climate-controlled environment, maybe in the main part of your house, just could do a lot to help prevent that kind of deterioration as well.
So-
and also storing them sort of upright or flat.
Meaning books?
Yeah,
Okay.
so books, shelved upright and not like leaning over. That also damages the bindings.
So when you say up, you mean straight, like you would find in a library. That's how the books should be stored.
I mean, it's fine
No.
if they're up or if they're laying flat on their sides. But, often this happens at my bookshelves at home all the time, where you take something out and the other ones kind of tumble over.
yeah,
And, if they're like that for a day, that's not a big problem. But if they're like that for, months or years, it can damage the binding. So.
Okay. And for pictures, people who are, a lot of people take digital pictures, but is there a preference these days for, I wouldn't even say these days, but in the future, what would you expect the university or any other kind of archive to want pictures in the form? Would they want it in physical form? Would they want digital copies, or what would be the best way for pictures?
So digital preservation is a really hot topic in archives right now. We're just sort of learning how to deal with materials that are born digital, where there was never because right now most of the digital materials that we have in our digital archive were once physical materials that we scanned and made digital copies. But now we're starting to get in things that are digital from the start. It used to be that the university would send out newsletters from different departments, and they would go through the mail or through the intercampus mail. And then we could just have paper copies of them. But now they all go through email, so you start to think, how do we preserve those?
Oh, I see. Okay.
It's really not my area, but
but they're thinking
yeah,
about
so
that's a
they're
very hot
thinking about
topic.
how we're going to start preserving those kind of things. We're getting storage, and I think there's different programs that you can use to make sure that every time you access a digital document, you're not changing it.
Okay.
That kind of thing. So that's really where the future of archives is headed, into that kind of digital preservation. So the answer is no one really knows yet. But
Okay.
yeah, if you have digital photos, again, it's something that we're still coming to, is preserving those. But for right now, we're keeping digital materials in the archives. We have an external hard drive. We have a shared drive that we use. So.
And since online and digital technology changes so quickly, would you recommend that people actually print out the physical pictures because sometimes the format can change, or will you all always have some way to, even if it's a floppy disk or something, something that's so old, like would you all still be able to access it, or at some point, or do you? And I know this is all new, but I'm just thinking about like people who do have all of these, SD cards, and is it still a good idea to print out in addition to having the cards?
So, I mean, it really depends. I think if you wanted to have all your bases covered, yeah, print a copy. Because it really takes, if you're in your home trying to preserve them, it takes kind of constant attention. Every time you get a new computer, you have to transfer all your
Yes.
files. You always want to make sure that you're backing everything up, upgrading to new file types. But
And I would imagine that because everything is on a card of some sort, and you can actually put a lot of information on cards. I would imagine that going forward, places like Seton Hall archives would be a challenge trying to figure out what to actually keep and what is not as important, because you can put a lot of data on just the card. Mm-hmm. So is that something that you all are also thinking about in other archives as well?
Yeah, I mean, I think that's another thing that there's so much more generated now, that because it doesn't really cost anything to send another email,
right. So
we have to start thinking about what kinds of things we're going to preserve and what kind of things don't need to be preserved. So.
One other thing that I thought was so interesting, and I'm guilty of this because I went to 2 schools that I'm sure probably have archives, but you mentioned off camera that probably, there's a certain number of students at Seton Hall who don't even know that the archives exist. I mean, could you remind us how, the hours, where people can get in contact with you or anyone at the archives if they're interested in finding more about the archives?
Yeah, so we're open Monday through Friday, 9 to 5, and we're on the ground floor of the Walsh Library on campus. And you can call us. It's 973-761-9476. My email is Brianna L LoSardo at shu.edu. And there's also a general email, archives at shu.edu, that you can contact with questions.
Okay. So you've mentioned a lot about how the general public, like what kinds of things they can find. What would be interesting to Seton Hall University students? What would help them perhaps in their studies?
So often students get assigned projects. There's an Irish history class that's always assigned a project that a lot of them come in to use the McManus Irish collection, which is our Irish collection of rare books.
Okay.
So just different subjects that they might have projects relating to. Some students might want to learn more about the history of the university, just because you go there now and you might want to think, what was it like 50 years ago, 100 years ago, when people were going there. So some students might be interested in our university collections. I think there's a fair number of students at Seton Hall that have, legacy connections to the university. So their parents went there, their grandparents went there. So we do sometimes get, like on move-in day, families come in and they want to see the old yearbooks because they want to, they want to find Dad. So
oh, that's cool.
That's cool too.
So so I'm trying to make sure I understand. So the archives would also have the yearbooks as well as the library, or are they somehow affiliated so that you don't have redundant materials, or?
Yeah, I think the yearbooks are just in the archives. I don't think they have them in the main collection of the university. We have the yearbooks and also the school newspapers, the Setonian, going back to 1924, or 26, which is when they started.
Wow.
So
that's pretty amazing. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. I mean, I think first of all, people probably did not know that just that the archives were available to the general public. But now it's interesting, to know that the Seton Hall University students can also, go to the archives to find some interesting information for projects or just personal information. So that leads me to what you do. I know that you are a special assistant in the collections. What exactly what would you do on a day-to-day basis? Because I know you said you don't do a lot of some of the other things that we talked about. So what would you do?
So I'm sort of the front-end person for the archives. So when people call, they're probably going to talk to me.
Okay.
I assist when researchers come in. I help them. I show them how to use the materials, sort of what our guidelines are in the reading room for using materials. If people call with research requests, sometimes I'll do genealogy requests, or when the genealogy researchers come in, I help them get set up, and if they need to find other parishes, I can help them with that. So mostly I just assist researchers, and I also occasionally do a little processing or a little work with the collections in that way.
And so is there a special training for learning this type of information, like the genealogy information, learning about the archives and things like that?
I mean, for the most part, I kind of just learned on the job.
Okay.
When I came in, I just, started doing one search, and, you learn the different ways to go through. my boss, Kathleen Dodds, who's the director of the archives, is really an expert in genealogy, and she helped me a lot learning how to search in the Catholic records and, what's normal to find, what's not normal, that kind of thing.
Okay.
So.
And you've been working there for a couple of years now?
Yeah, about a year.
A year.
Yeah.
And has it, so now that you've been there a year or so, your technique for like looking for genealogy and different records, has it become easier? And now can you like just do it independently, or how have you found it?
Yeah, I mean it gets easier sort of knowing what to expect and doing these searches. It still depends on kind of what the person who's requesting the search gives us, if they know specifically which parish it is, or if they know where the family was living and they think it might have been one of the ones around there. But yeah, it's just easier to know how the records are set up, so you can go right in and search for what you're looking for.
And can you remind us again, like the area that the geographic area in New Jersey that Seton Hall would have information for people who are watching in case they're interested in coming to the archives?
So we have the sacramental records information for Bergen, Essex, Hudson, and Union counties, which are part of the Archdiocese of Newark. It's interesting because originally the Archdiocese of Newark, when it was founded, encompassed all of New Jersey.
Okay.
So sometimes people think that we would have it for other counties, but we only have records for the counties which are currently part of the Archdiocese.
Okay. And that's when they would have to, if they'd have to go to Trenton, like you
Yeah,
were
they'd
saying,
have
to
to go to
find the
Trenton or-
information. So,
yeah.
so we have about a minute left. Thank you so much for being here. This was great information. Is there any last thing that you would like to leave the viewers with?
I just sort of want everyone to know that the archives is there and that we have a lot of great resources that you can find if you're interested in the history of the Archdiocese or the history of the university, or even just in general historical documents.
That's great. Thank you so much. This is Dustin's Kaleidoscope, and we will see you next time.